The alien council chamber was a giant circle of black stone, its walls glowing with faint blue light, the air cold enough to make breath turn to mist. Tall guards in silver armor stood at every corner, their eyes fixed on the center table. Around it sat the most dangerous predators of the galaxy, leaders of species that had hunted worlds for sport. Humans were not supposed to be here. They had been invited only as observers, to learn and to watch, not to speak, not to interrupt. Dr. Elena Voss sat at the far end of the table, her hands resting quietly on the smooth metal surface. She listened to the deep voices of the predators as they boasted about their kills, their eyes shining with pride. One alien, a tall scaled creature with crimson horns, told a story about the old days, about hunting strange prey on blue-green worlds. He spoke of humans, calling them slow, fragile, easy targets. The others laughed, their voices like growls and clicks echoing in the high chamber. Elena kept her face calm, but her heartbeat was steady and strong. The insult did not sting her pride. Instead, it stirred something older inside her, a memory of stories her grandfather told her about survival, about the times when humans lived with nothing but the earth in their hands, when they hunted and were hunted in return. The alien with crimson horns leaned back in his chair and smirked, saying that humans could only fight when they were trained by technology, that without their tools they were nothing, prey for any true predator. The chamber filled with quiet chuckles, low rumbles, soft hisses, the sound of claws tapping against metal. That was when Elena spoke, her voice cutting through the air like a sudden blade, clear and steady, the word simple. "Trained or wild," she said. The sound died at once, the echoes fading into heavy silence. The blue lights on the wall seemed to dim. Every alien head turned toward her, their eyes sharp and questioning. Predators did not like those words. In their culture, wild meant something dangerous, something beyond control, something even they would not hunt without care. It meant a creature that was not taught by order or command, but born with its skill, its fury, its will to survive. For a long moment no one spoke. The tension hung in the air like the moment before a storm. Then a voice came from the right side of the table, slow and cold. It was a member of the Acrith, a species with black skin like polished stone and long slit pupils. They were old hunters, feared for their patience and skill. "If your kind is wild," the Acrith said, leaning forward, his voice a deep growl that rolled through the chamber, "then the galaxy is in danger." The words made the air feel heavier. Some predators shifted in their seats. Others stared hard at Elena, as if they could read her thoughts. The tall scaled creature with crimson horns bared his teeth in what might have been a smile or a threat. Elena met his gaze without blinking, her mind already working through what to say next. She knew that the council believed humans were no more than trained prey, shaped by weapons and machines. But she also knew the truth, a truth buried deep in history. She leaned forward just slightly, her voice low but sharp enough to reach every corner of the room. "Are you sure," she asked, "that you have only faced the trained ones?" A ripple moved through the council, quiet whispers in alien tongues, a slow tap of claw against metal from the Acrith. The crimson-horned one narrowed his eyes. In the far corner a small predator with silver fur shifted uncomfortably, its large eyes darting between the council members, as if it remembered something, something it did not wish to speak. Elena's heart did not race. Her breathing stayed calm. She wanted them to think, to wonder, to remember if there had ever been a time when humans faced them without armor, without ships, without orders. She could see the doubt beginning to form in some of their eyes, the kind of doubt that could grow into fear if left alone. A deep voice from the upper seats broke the silence. "What do you mean?" it asked, slow and cautious. Elena's lips curved into the smallest hint of a smile. "You think you know my kind," she said, "but you have only seen the ones you trained, the ones you thought you understood." Her words were quiet, but the room seemed to lean toward her. Even the guards at the walls tilted their heads slightly. The Acrith's slit pupils narrowed. He tapped the table once with a claw, the sound sharp as a crack. "If there are wild ones left," he said, "then we must know." The crimson-horned one snorted but said nothing, his eyes fixed on Elena like a hunter watching prey that might bite back. The blue lights on the walls flickered once. The cold air seemed to grow colder. No one laughed now, No one boasted. Elena's question still hung there, heavy and dangerous. Trained or wild, the answer would decide whether humans were prey, or something far worse. And deep inside, Elena already knew. The silence in the alien council chamber had weight, a kind of heavy pressure that pressed on the skin and made the air hard to breathe. Every member of the Predator Council watched Dr. Elena Voss now, their eyes reflecting the pale blue glow of the walls. The Akrath hunter with the slit pupils still leaned forward. His voice had been the last to speak. His words still hung in the air like the smell of blood after a kill. Elena did not answer right away. She let the silence stretch, letting them think, letting them wonder. She knew that in Predator culture the one who breaks the silence too soon shows weakness. So she waited, her hand still on the cold table, her breathing calm, her eyes moving slowly from one alien to another. When she finally spoke, her voice was steady, not loud but clear enough for every ear in the chamber. "You think you know us because you have seen our soldiers, our fleets, our training grounds," she said. "But there is something you have not seen, something we keep even from our own allies." The crimson-horned predator tilted his head, his expression a mix of interest and mockery. "And what would that be?" he asked, his tone dripping with disbelief. Elena reached into the case at her side, a small black device with smooth edges and a single silver band across its middle. She placed it on the table and tapped the band. The room darkened. The blue wall lights dimmed until the council chamber was lit only by the large holographic image that rose above the table. The image showed a dense green jungle under a gray sky. Thick mist curling around the trees. The sound of distant rain and the call of unseen animals filled the chamber. Then the view shifted. A human figure crouched low among the roots of a giant tree, his skin painted with dark stripes of mud. No armor, no rifle, only a crude spear in his hand, his eyes sharp and focused. "This is from before the first human ship left our home system," Elena said. "Before we had allies, before we had treaties." The human in the image moved with slow precision, every step silent despite the wet ground, his breathing barely visible. He blended with the shadows as if he belonged to them. In the background, a large creature moved through the trees, tall as two men, with thick fur and tusks, its claws tearing into the bark, its eyes searching for prey. The human waited until the beast passed close, then moved like lightning, striking low at its leg, rolling away from the counterattack. The spear broke, but it did not matter. He was already behind the beast, using a vine to trip it, then plunging a sharpened bone into the back of its neck. Gasps and low growls came from some council members. A few leaned closer to see more clearly. Others narrowed their eyes. "That," Elena said, "was not a soldier, not a trained fighter in the way you understand it. That was a villager, a hunter from a time when survival was our only law." The crimson-horned predator clicked his claws against the table. "Your prey beast was slow," he said. "Strong but clumsy. Hardly a true test." Without speaking, Elena tapped the device again. The jungle vanished, replaced by an open grass plain under a burning sun. The air shimmered with heat. In the distance, shapes moved, running fast. They were lean, four-legged, with teeth like knives, each one larger than a man. 3 humans appeared in the frame. No armor, no firearms, only curved blades and long sticks tipped with stone. The creatures charged, their speed terrifying. Yet the humans did not run. They split apart, moving in a pattern that drew the beasts into a trap. One human fainted left, another rolled into the tall grass. The third leapt forward to strike at the lead predator's throat. The fight was brutal and fast, 2 beasts down within moments. The last fled limping into the distance, the humans breathing hard but alive. Now the chamber was silent again. The Akrath's slit pupils narrowed, his claw tapping once against the table, a slow, deliberate sound. "Those were not prey tactics," he said. "Those were predator tactics." Elena's expression did not change. "Yes," she said. "And that is the point. We were predators before we built cities, before we flew ships, before we had laws, before we even had names for ourselves." One of the smaller council members, a silver-furred creature with large black eyes, shifted uncomfortably in its seat. "I have seen these movements before," it said softly. "In old training records, very old, older than the council itself. The crimson-horned predator gave a low growl. "Fairy tales," he said. "Old prey stories to scare hatchlings." Elena ignored him. She tapped the device again, and a final image appeared. This one grainy and dark, the sound of wind and something else, a low rhythmic noise, like heavy breathing. The image cleared to show a group of alien hunters moving through a forest at night. Their eyes glowing in the dark, they carried spears tipped with crystal and wore armor of bone. Behind them, unseen at first, shapes moved in perfect silence, low to the ground, closing in from both sides. The hunters began to sense something, turning their heads. But it was too late. The shapes rose up, humans, faces painted black, teeth bared, striking with sudden violence. The recording ended abruptly, the image freezing on a single frame. A human crouched over a fallen alien, eyes wild, hair matted with sweat, one hand gripping a stone blade, the other pressing the alien's head into the dirt. Elena let the image hang there for a long moment. Then she spoke, her voice quiet. These were not trained soldiers. These were wild humans. They did not fight for honor, for law, for payment. They fought because they were alive, and because the thing in front of them wanted to take that away. The silver-furred predator shifted again, its voice barely above a whisper. "If this is true, then the council has made a mistake for centuries." The Akrith did not look away from the frozen image. "No mistake," he said slowly. "Only a choice to forget." The crimson-horned one gave a sharp laugh. "Forget, remember, it changes nothing. They are not wild now. They are tamed by their machines and their treaties." Elena finally turned to him, her gaze steady. "You think so," she said. "You think that the wild can be erased, but it is not gone. It waits, it sleeps. But when it wakes, there will be no treaty that can hold it." Her words made several council members glance at each other, their faces unreadable, some tapping claws, some folding arms. The Akrith sat back slowly, his eyes never leaving Elena. "Then perhaps," he said, "we should test this. We should see if your wild is real." Elena tilted her head slightly. "Are you sure?" she asked. "Because if you are wrong, you will not be able to control what you unleash." The chamber was still again, the blue lights casting cold shadows across the table. Outside the high windows, the endless black of space seemed even darker, as if the stars themselves were holding their breath. The Akrith's voice was soft now, almost thoughtful. "We will find out," he said. "And if the wild is still in you, then the galaxy must decide if it will chain it or fear it." Elena's hand rested lightly on the small device, her eyes fixed on the predators across from her. She did not smile. She did not speak. She simply waited. And in that waiting was something the council could not name, but could feel. A quiet promise that the answer they were about to seek might be the last answer they ever wanted to hear. The council chamber was not the same after the old recordings ended. There was a tension now that clung to every breath, every sound. Even the walls seemed to hold the weight of unspoken thoughts. The Akrith, with his slit pupils, leaned back in his seat, but his gaze never left Dr. Elena Voss. The crimson-horned predators' claws tapped the table in a slow and deliberate rhythm. The silver-furred one kept shifting in its seat, as though the air itself was too thin. It was the Akrith who spoke first, his voice carrying across the chamber like a low rumble in the ground before an earthquake. "Words and recordings prove nothing," he said. "Predators do not trust stories. They trust the hunt. If you claim your kind can be wild, then let us see it here now." Elena's face remained calm, though inside she understood what was about to be proposed. "What kind of test?" she asked, her tone neutral. The crimson-horned predator's grin was wide, sharp teeth gleaming in the pale light. "A simple trial," he said. "One of your humans against a predator species in a controlled arena. No armor, no advanced weapons, only what the environment provides." The silver-furred one shifted again, uneasy. Such a trial could end in death. It murmured, but its voice was ignored. Elena placed her hands together slowly, her eyes on the Akrith. "And if the human wins?" she asked. "What then?" The Akrith's pupils narrowed further. "Then perhaps the council will accept that your kind is not as tame as some here believe," he said. "But if the human loses, then you will stop this talk of wildness." The chamber agreed quickly, too quickly, their voices mixing in clicks, growls, and hisses. The predators were eager to see blood, eager to test the myth against their own claws and teeth. A day later the trial was set. The arena chosen was a sealed biodome on the edge of the station, its inside filled with thick trees, deep undergrowth, and rock slick with moisture. The air there was heavy and wet, carrying the smell of moss and soil. The chosen predator opponent was a Dreshkin, a species known for its speed and relentless pursuit. Its body was lean but packed with muscle, its claws curved like sickles, its eyes yellow and unblinking. The human was not a soldier, not even a current hunter. He was a young man from a rural colony on the edge of human space. His name was Daniel Rourke, tall, broad-shouldered, with sun-darkened skin and quiet eyes. When he stepped into the arena, he carried nothing but the plain clothes he wore, his hands empty. The council watched from a high platform above the biodome, their eyes tracking every movement below. The Acrith sat forward, his claws resting on the railing. The crimson-horned predator's grin never faded. Elena stood at the far end, her gaze fixed on Daniel. When the signal was given, the Dreshkin moved first, its body low, its steps almost silent. It circled through the trees, testing the air. Daniel did not move at first. He stayed still, listening, his eyes scanning the canopy above and the shadows between the trunks. The Dreshkin lunged without warning, claws flashing, but Daniel was already moving, not away but sideways, letting the creature strike tear through empty air. He grabbed a branch as thick as his arm and snapped it free with a sharp twist, the sound of wood breaking echoing briefly in the humid air. The predator came again, faster this time, and Daniel dropped low, swinging the branch up to strike across its forelimb. The hit did not stop the Dreshkin, but it slowed it, the claws missing his side by the width of a hand. Daniel moved deeper into the undergrowth, his steps quick but quiet. The Dreshkin followed, weaving through trees, its breathing heavy now, its yellow eyes locked on the human's back. From above the council whispered in their own languages, the Acrith watching with a strange stillness. Daniel stopped near a fallen tree, its roots twisted into sharp points. He crouched, breaking the branch into a shorter spear, his eyes never leaving the movement in the shadows. The Dreshkin burst forward, the distance between them closing in a heartbeat. Daniel sidestepped again, using the predator's own speed against it, driving the sharpened branch into its shoulder. The Dreshkin roared, spinning to slash with its other claw, but Daniel had already thrown himself backward into the thick roots, using them as a shield. The predator tore at the wood, splinters flying, but every time it reached in, Daniel struck again, not wasting strength, each movement precise, controlled. Minutes passed, the fight circling through the arena. The Dreshkin's breathing grew ragged, its left arm now hanging weakly. Daniel's face was calm, though sweat ran down his neck. He was watching, studying, waiting for the moment. That moment came when the Dreshkin leapt high to drop down on him from above, claws aimed at his chest. Daniel rolled aside, snatching a vine from the ground. In one smooth motion, he looped it around the predator's neck as it landed, using its own momentum to pull it off balance. The Dreshkin crashed into the mud, snarling, twisting, but Daniel tightened the vine, his arms locked, his weight forcing the creature's head down. The predator thrashed, its claws carving furrows in the soil, but the human's grip did not break, his breathing steady, his eyes cold. After a long moment, the Dreshkin's struggle slowed, then stopped. Daniel released the vine, stepping back, the predator still alive but beaten, its chest rising and falling with slow breaths. From above the council chamber, there was silence, no laughter, no mockery, only the sound of the humid wind through the biodome trees. The crimson-horned predator's grin had vanished. The silver-furred one stared wide-eyed. The Acrith's claws tapped once, slow and sharp. Elena's gaze met Daniel's from across the arena. She gave the smallest nod. He returned it with a faint movement of his chin before turning and walking away from the fallen predator. When the gates opened and Daniel stepped out, the council did not speak right away. The predators looked at one another as if measuring something unseen. The Acrith was the first to break the silence. "That was not training," he said slowly. "That was instinct." The crimson-horned predator's voice was low now, his earlier bravado gone. "Perhaps Perhaps the wild still breathes in them. Elena stepped forward, her voice even. "I warned you," she said. "You cannot control it. You can only hope it stays sleeping." The silver-furred one shifted again, its voice almost a whisper. "And if it wakes?" Elena's eyes swept the room, meeting the gaze of each predator in turn. "If it wakes," she said, "then you will remember what real fear is." The biodome doors closed behind Daniel, the scent of wet soil and broken wood still drifting into the observation deck, the sound of the fight still echoing in the minds of those who had watched. And though no one said it aloud, every predator there knew that the test had not only been about one human, it had been about all of them. And the answer was now written in the silence. Humans were not prey, not trained pets of their machines. They were something older, something that could rise again when pushed, something the galaxy had once feared and perhaps would fear again. The council chamber was quieter than it had been in many years. The air was heavy as if the station itself had drawn in a long breath and now refused to let it out. No one spoke after the predator test. The image of Daniel Rourke standing over the beaten Dreshkin still burned in every mind. The Akratha's slit pupils followed Elena Voss as she stepped forward, her movements slow and deliberate, like someone who had just placed a piece on a board in a game that no one else realized had already begun. She did not raise her voice. She did not need to. Each word carried across the curved walls with perfect clarity. "You have all seen what you needed to see," she said. "But what you do not know is that this is not new. Your council has seen it before." The crimson-horned predator gave a sharp click of his teeth. "Impossible," he said. "We would remember." Elena's gaze moved to him like the point of a blade. "You would remember if the truth had not been buried," she replied. "Buried by your own hands." A low ripple of murmur spread among the predators, some leaning forward, some glancing sideways at one another. The silver-furred one shifted in its seat, its voice trembling. "I have heard whispers of such things," it said. "In the old vaults beneath the council archives, records sealed before my kind joined the council." The Akratha's claw tapped the table once, a sharp sound that silenced the chamber. "Show us," he said, his tone more command than request. Elena reached into her case once more, pulling out a thin metal shard etched with patterns that glimmered faintly under the blue lights. She held it up between her fingers. "This," she said, "was taken from your forbidden archives. It contains star maps older than your current charts, older even than this station." She placed the shard into the table slot, and the lights dimmed. A holographic map filled the air. Thousands of stars glittered against black space, lines of travel marked between them. But there were also dark regions, empty of markings, with symbols in red. "These sectors," Elena said, pointing to the red symbols, "were marked centuries ago as restricted zones. Do not hunt, no patrols, no expeditions, no exceptions." The crimson-horned predator scoffed. "Dangerous space, unstable systems," he said dismissively, but his eyes did not leave the red zones. Elena's voice remained steady. "No," she said. "They were not dangerous because of nature. They were dangerous because of us." She moved her hand through the projection, and one of the red zones expanded until its stars filled the air, each marked with small glyphs. "This was Earth's region before we left our home system," she continued. "These marks here are not warnings for navigators. They are warnings for hunters. They read in your old tongue, wild zone, human territory." The silver-furred one let out a sharp breath. "It is true, then," it whispered. "We feared them before they ever had ships." The Akrath leaned closer to the projection, his claws curling slightly. "These maps were erased from public record," he said. "I was told it was because of faulty data." Elena looked at him without blinking. "It was not faulty. It was erased because your kind could not admit the truth, that you had faced something you could not defeat, something that hunted you as you hunted others." One of the heavier-scaled predators with black armor plates growled low. "Stories," he said. "Tales told to make prey seem dangerous." Elena did not argue. She simply tapped the shard again, and the map vanished, replaced by a series of images, grainy and aged, each one showing alien hunting parties. But the hunters were not triumphant. They were broken, wounded, and some images' entire groups lay still on the ground, their weapons scattered, their eyes wide with the last thing they had seen. "These are your hunters," she said. "These are the ones who entered human territory. Not one returned alive without being marked by fear." The crimson-horned predator's grin was gone now, replaced by a thin line of unease. "If this is true," he said slowly, "why are humans not wild now?" Elena's answer was quiet. "Because we learned to hide it, to bury it, because the wild draws fear, and fear draws enemies, and for a time we needed peace to grow." The Akratha's eyes narrowed. "And if the wild comes back," he asked, "will you turn it on us?" Elena did not look away. "We will turn it on whoever forces us to remember it," she said. A shadow of silence fell again, the kind that was not empty but full of thoughts none of them wished to speak aloud. In the corner of the chamber the silver-furred one's tail twitched nervously, its gaze moving between the others as if expecting claws to be drawn at any moment. The scaled predator with black armor plates spoke again, his voice heavy. "The council must decide what to do with this knowledge," he said. "Either destroy it or prepare for it." The Akratha's claw tapped twice this time, slow, deliberate. "Destroying it will not destroy them," he said. "If the wild still lives in them, it will show again, sooner or later." Elena stepped back, her case in her hands. "You can pretend you have a choice," she said. "But the truth is you are already deciding with every word you speak, with every fear you hide behind your teeth." The crimson-horned predator leaned forward, his eyes burning with a strange mix of anger and curiosity. "If you have hidden this wild for so long," he said, "what made you bring it back now?" For the first time Elena allowed a faint smile, not of joy but of something colder. "Because you spoke of hunting us as if we were animals," she said. "Because you forgot what happens when the animal remembers it has teeth." The Akratha's gaze held hers for a long moment. Then he looked away toward the darkened map, still lingering faintly in the holographic mist. "Then perhaps," he said quietly, "the galaxy must remember too." The chamber doors closed with a soft hiss, sealing the conversation within. Somewhere beyond the station's walls the endless dark of space stretched in every direction, silent and watching. The predators seated around the table each felt the weight of it pressing against their backs, and for the first time in many years, the thought crossed their minds that perhaps they were not the top of the chain after all. Elena gathered her case, the shard back inside, her steps slow as she turned toward the exit, her voice carrying one last time across the room. "History is not gone," she said. "It is only waiting for someone to open the door." And with that she walked out, leaving behind a silence that was no longer the silence of control, but the silence of fear, the kind that creeps in like a shadow and stays no matter how bright the lights are, the kind that changes how predators sleep at night. The silence after her question felt heavier than the steel walls around them. The air in the council chamber turned thick like the pressure before a storm, and every alien eye fixed on her with a mix of disbelief and unease. Her voice still seemed to echo, even though she had spoken minutes ago trained or wild she had asked, and those words carried a weight no one could ignore. It was not simply a question about a single human, it was a challenge to centuries of unspoken rules about where humanity stood in the predator hierarchies that had shaped galactic law for generations. Commander Hale stood unmoving, his jaw tight, his hands clasped behind his back, but his eyes were locked on the council leader, a towering being of silver fur and deep amber eyes known as Hai Fong Vres, who had once fought wars before most in the room were born. The leader's gaze did not leave the human officer, yet his voice, when it came, was directed to the room. "What do you mean by trained or wild?" His tone was slow, almost cautious, as if the wrong word could break something fragile. She did not flinch. She stepped forward and spoke in that same calm voice, though the words carried sharp edges. "I mean exactly what I said. Every species here has a classification system for predators. They are either trained under control, bound by the leash of rules, or they are wild, unpredictable, dangerous beyond reason until they are broken or destroyed, and yet humans have been left unclassified." The statement sent a low ripple through the chamber. Some aliens shifted uneasily, their claws or tendrils twitching. Others stared at her, as if seeing her for the first time. Unclassified meant something dangerous in these circles. It meant a creature whose place in the hierarchy had not been settled, whose nature could tilt the balance of power in unpredictable ways. Hai Fong Vres leaned back in his seat, studying her with those burning amber eyes. Then his gaze flicked toward the human, standing at her side, a young man, with a soldier's posture, but eyes that carried something restless inside, something that did not match the stillness of his stance. "Tell me," he said to the young man, "what are you?" The soldier's mouth opened, but nothing came out. His throat moved as if swallowing words that refused to form. His gaze darted once toward the woman who had asked the question, then back to the leader. Finally his voice emerged, quiet but steady. "I do not know, sir." And that answer was worse than anything else he could have said, because it left every possibility open. The chamber began to buzz with whispers, some in voices so low they were like the hiss of wind through dry leaves, others in sharp clicks or guttural hums. Each species had its own language, but the tone was the same, unease. The council had gathered to discuss a treaty, or so they thought. But now the room was shifting its focus away from trade or law to the single question of whether humanity was a controlled predator or a wild one, and what that meant for the galaxy. The woman who had started all this did not smile. She did not gloat. She simply watched the ripple she had created. Like a stone dropped into a still lake, the edges of her eyes held a calm intensity, the kind that comes from someone who has thought about the consequences long before speaking. She knew what the council feared. Wild predators were not allowed to move freely. In civilized space, wild predators were hunted until they submitted or were gone. Hai Fong Vres's voice cut through the low noise like a blade. "I will require proof," he said. "If this human is to be considered trained or wild, it must be shown in action. The test will be dangerous. There will be no intervention. Once it begins." His eyes returned to the soldier. "You may refuse if you wish, but refusal will decide the question for you." The soldier looked again at the woman, and for the first time, she gave the smallest nod. It was not reassurance, but permission, perhaps even a challenge. She straightened her shoulders and said, "I accept," and the chamber grew quiet again. From the shadows at the edge of the room, a figure moved forward, tall and thin, its skin a deep shade of blue, its voice like the slow roll of thunder. "The arbiter will choose the test," it said, "and when the arbiter chooses, there is no appeal." The council members murmured again, but none challenged the statement. The arbiter was feared even among predators. The woman spoke then, but not to the soldier and not to the leader. Her words were for the room itself. "For every listening ear, I ask only that you watch closely," she said, "and remember what you see, because once this begins, there will be no doubt about the answer to my question." Her tone was not arrogant, it was final. The young soldier felt the weight of her words settle on him like armor and chains. At the same time, his pulse beat harder in his neck, but his face stayed still. He knew now that whatever came next would decide not just his fate, but the way every human would be seen in this galaxy for decades, maybe centuries. Hai Fong Vres raised one clawed hand, and the heavy doors of the chamber swung open, revealing a corridor lit by cold blue light. The arbiter stepped into view, its long limbs moving with a slow grace that suggested both patience and deadly speed. It gestured once, and the soldier followed without hesitation, though every instinct told him to stay in the safety of the chamber. The woman remained behind, her eyes tracking him until he vanished from sight. Then she turned her gaze back to the leader. "I hope for your sake," she said, "that you are ready for the answer, because it will not be the one you expect." And with that, the arbiter's voice echoed from the corridor, "Follow and be judged." The doors closed, leaving the council in the thick silence. Once more no one moved, no one spoke, but the air was heavy with the knowledge that something irreversible had begun. The corridor narrowed as the soldier followed the arbiter, its walls etched with patterns that seemed to twist and shift under the cold blue light. Each step echoed too loud in the silence, as if the place itself was listening. The air carried a faint metallic taste, and somewhere far ahead a low vibration hummed like the slow breathing of a sleeping beast. The soldier kept his eyes forward, his training pushing him to match the arbiter's pace, but his thoughts moved faster, each one sharper than the last. They reached a chamber shaped like a circle carved into living stone, the ceiling so high it faded into shadow. In the center of the floor lay a ring of dark metal embedded into the rock, faint symbols glowing along its edge. The arbiter stepped into the ring and turned its gaze on the soldier, its voice rolling out like thunder in slow motion. "You will face what we place before you. There will be no weapons beyond what you can take from the ground, no allies, no mercy. The trial ends when one of you no longer stands, or when the ring drinks its fill." The soldier's pulse surged in his ears, but his face remained unreadable. He stepped into the ring, feeling the strange metal under his boots. It was warm, almost alive. The arbiter moved to the edge and raised a long arm. In a gesture, the symbols flared brighter, and the air inside the ring began to shimmer. From the shadows beyond the ring, something moved first, only a ripple in the light. Then a shape emerged, tall and broad, with shoulders like slabs of stone and skin that shifted in hue from deep crimson to black. Its eyes burned with a cold hunger. The creature's breath hissed between rows of jagged teeth. The soldier recognized it from whispered stories among frontier troops of Vorax predator from the uncharted zones, where even armed patrols vanished without trace. The creature stepped into the ring, and the symbols flared again, locking the boundary. The arbiter's voice came once more. The Vorax has never been tamed, never been trained. It kills. For the rhythm of it will test not your strength alone, but your nature. The Vorax crouched, low, muscles coiling under its strange, shifting skin. The soldier did not move. His hands hung loose at his sides, his eyes fixed on the predator. He could feel the gaze of the council, even though they were far away, watching through the chamber's recording systems. He knew this was the moment that would answer the woman's question. The Vorax lunged with a sudden burst of speed, its weight shaking the ground. The soldier twisted to the side, feeling the rush of air as claws missed his chest by inches. His hand found a loose shard of stone on the floor, and he gripped it tightly. His movements measured, not wild, each step calculated. The Vorax circled him, snarling, testing his reactions. The second charge came faster, sharper. The soldier dropped low, sweeping his leg out to catch the creature's knee. It stumbled, but did not fall, and its tail lashed across his shoulder, driving him back. Pain flared, but he stayed upright, his grip on the stone unbroken. He stepped forward, instead of retreating, closing the gap where the Vorax's size became less of an advantage. The creature's claws slashed again, grazing his arm and leaving a hot line of blood, but he pushed in under its reach, driving the shard into the softer joint at its side. The Vorax roared and staggered back, the ring's symbols pulsing brighter with the sound. The soldier did not press recklessly. He waited, watching as the predator paced. Its eyes narrowed, its breath heavier. It lunged again, but this time he met it halfway, pivoting on one foot to drive his shoulder into its chest, using its momentum to throw it off balance. The impact sent both of them to the ground, the shard skittering away into the dark. The creature recovered first, slamming a heavy fist toward his head, but he caught its wrist, twisting hard until he felt the joint strain. His legs locked around its torso, holding it close, where claws could not reach. The Vorax thrashed its teeth, snapping inches from his face, but he forced its head to the side and drove his elbow down again and again into the joint until the bone gave with a sharp crack. The sound echoed in the chamber, followed by the Vorax's howl of pain. The soldier rolled away, grabbing the shard again. He rose slowly, his chest heaving. The Vorax limped toward him, rage twisting its face, but there was hesitation now. The predator had met something it could not read, something that did not break or charge. Without thought, the soldier stepped forward, his voice calm though his breath was ragged. Yield, he said. For a moment the only sound was the low growl in the Vorax's throat. Then it lowered its head, not in submission to him perhaps, but to the truth of the fight. The ring's symbols dimmed the shimmer in the air, fading. The arbiter stepped forward, and the Vorax retreated into the shadows, its eyes lingering on the soldier until it was gone. The arbiter's gaze held him for a long moment. Then it turned and spoke for all the recorders to hear, trained not by leash, not by fear, but by choice. The trial is concluded. The human stands. Somewhere far away in the council chamber, the woman allowed herself the faintest of smiles. The answer had been given not in words, but in the nature of the fight. The soldier had not chased a kill. He had not given in to chaos. He had fought with control, even against something that lived only for destruction, and that truth would ripple outward through every corridor of power in the galaxy. The soldier stepped out of the ring, the warmth of the strange metal fading under his feet. The arbiter's voice followed him. Remember, human, the trial ends here, but the watching never does. And with that, the chamber doors closed behind him, leaving the symbols to fade into darkness. The council chamber was heavy with attention. No one could shake. The trial's conclusion echoed in every corner, and even though no one said it aloud, the question that had hung in the air for so long was now answered. Humans were neither fully trained nor wholly wild. They were something different, something that refused the easy categories that had held predator hierarchies in place for centuries. Haifeng Vress stared down at the darkened table, his amber eyes clouded with thoughts no one dared voice aloud. The room was crowded with representatives from countless species, each with their own histories, their own fears, but all shared the weight of this moment. The silence stretched until the crimson-horned predator broke it, his voice low and sharp. There will be those who seek to use this answer as a weapon of reason to hunt humans as threats, but also those who will want to bind them more tightly to control their power. Elena stepped forward, her voice calm and clear. The question was never about controlling humans or fearing them. It was about respect, about seeing the truth, no matter how uncomfortable it may be. The galaxy has long lived with a lie that placed humans in a box that does not fit, and that lie has shaped policy, law, and war for too long. The silver-furred one nodded slowly. The archives and histories sealed away were not just mistakes, they were fear dressed as wisdom. Hiding the wild within humans was a choice made out of panic. But now that choice was exposed. It must be faced, or everything will shift unpredictably. A murmur rose from the council. The scaled predator, with black armor plates, spoke next, warning of the chaos. This knowledge would unleash alliances, would break treaties, old grudges would flare to life. Again the balance of power would tremble, and none could say who would come out on top or who would fall first. The Acriv leaned forward. The council leader's voice held the weight of ages. The galaxy must prepare for change, not because humans are enemies, but because they are not what we thought they were. The wild and the trained exist in them side by side, and that duality makes them unpredictable and powerful. Whispers filled the room like a storm gathering strength. From one corner a voice rose. It was quiet, but clear, the voice of a young diplomat from a minor species. We must open dialogue, not with fear, but with understanding. The future depends on how we choose now to face this truth. Haifong Vres regarded the speaker, a flicker of approval in his eyes. Then he stood, addressing the council. The future of the galaxy is uncertain, but one thing is clear: the predator hierarchies we have relied on for generations are shattered. The question is not how to cage or kill what is wild, but how to coexist with what is new. Elena's gaze swept the chamber. She knew this was only the beginning. The truth they uncovered was not a conclusion, but a spark that would ignite conflicts and alliances alike. Her voice softened, but carried across the hall like a promise, and a warning. The wild is not gone, and it is not tamed. It waits in the hearts of humanity, and when it stirs, the galaxy will never be the same. The chamber doors opened, and the soldier who had faced the arbiter entered the room, his steps sure, but his eyes carrying the weight of what had been asked and answered. Every creature turned to look. The silence was thick, and for a moment no one moved. Then Haifong Vres gestured for him to speak. The soldier's voice was steady. He told of the fight to control the choice. It was not instinct alone, but discipline and the will to survive, a balance of wild and trained. The council listened, and slowly the tension began to ease. Some nodded, others frowned, but all knew the reality had changed. From that day on, policies shifted, treaties were rewritten, and old hierarchies reevaluated. The galaxy watched humans with new eyes, not as wild beasts to be hunted, nor as tools to be controlled, but as something unpredictable, a force that could unite or destroy. In the deep corridors behind closed doors, new alliances formed, and old enemies reconsidered their stances. The council itself became a place of uneasy talks, where fear and hope warred silently. A new era had begun, an era born from a single question that shattered everything known. Outside the station, stars burned cold and distant, yet their light carried the promise of change. The galaxy held its breath, waiting to see if the wild within humanity would awaken fully, or if control and understanding could find balance in a universe that had just become far more complex. Elena stood looking out at the stars, knowing the question she asked had opened a door no one could close. She thought of the soldier and the trial, and the way the predator hierarchies had cracked and fractured, and she knew the story was far from over. The wild was only sleeping, and soon it would rise.